So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our another research breakfast organized by our grant office and Office for Research and Quality. Please take your seat, take your coffee, take your food with yourself, and we will try to start a discussion. Today, our invitation accepted a distinguished colleague, Zdeněk Andrysík, who started a new research group here at the med school under the Department of Biology. He's quite a new arrival here, so we thought it would be of interest to you to get to know him and to promote any possible collaborations to settle him down here. And because he's got quite an interesting career up to date, so I think it's also interesting to go through his path and elaborate on what worked for him, what didn't. We had quite a lot of interesting questions from the audience, so I promise that we will go through them because they are really up to what's Zdeněk is bringing here. So I once again thank you that you agreed to be a guest here, and could you please just start and introduce yourself, who you are, what brought you here, and then we will go on what comes to our mind.
Thank you for introducing me. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here and to talk to you, to share my experience with my stay in the United States. First, let me thank to the organizers. I think they really deserve an applause for organizing this breakfast. Thank you very much. Because this is great. I really appreciate it. The breakfast is excellent. Compared to Colorado, we just talked about that. There would be just cookies. Not at 8 a.m. I can tell you that, right? No one would show up at 8 a.m. So thank you also for coming so early. All right.
It's not so early here.
I know. I already realized that. So
your mic just.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry for that. That should be better?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let me introduce myself. My name is Zdeněk Andrysík, and I was born in Brno, graduated from Masaryk University, got my PhD here in, 2005, and then I started looking for a postdoc because many of my colleagues went through this experience, and I always thought it makes total sense to see how research is done elsewhere, because I was fully aware of my mindset I had here, that there are so many limits and there are things I wouldn't even consider when doing my research, and I just wanted to go into the environment where there are fewer limits and where are greater options, and also technologies are adopted maybe a little faster and not so much with the view can be afforded or not. So it was kind of struggle to get actually the first PhD or the first postdoc position, because I didn't have that many people around to talk to you how to do that, because some of my friends were still abroad, and I didn't have a good mentor who would either get me in touch. Well, that's actually not entirely true. My mentor was Jan Vondracek, and he got me in touch with his colleagues in the field. But it was not exactly what I wanted to do, and that would be one of my recommendations for you if you're at that point of your career when you may be considering a postdoc or even go from master's degree to a PhD program, to shift a little bit your focus, maybe to broaden your scope. So I really didn't want to continue the path which if I can accept the offer I had from one of Jan Wondracek's colleagues, I would be like doing exactly the same thing what we were doing here in Brno, and I just didn't want to keep doing the same thing, because what would be the point? I wouldn't learn that much. So I decided to look on my own. So the first thing what I started to do was just writing emails to all kinds of good labs and responding on opening ads. No one replied, right? Not a single person replied on these emails. And actually, yeah, this was 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. But I realized it's still the same thing. I just talked to one of the PhD candidates, and she told me, oh, I replied on 2 applications and no one wrote back, and that means my CV is probably not very good. This is not true, right? Okay, so please don't be discouraged by a lack of a response, because sometimes, and it's, I believe, similar here, when you have, for example, a lab and you have an opening and you want to hire someone, right? So, for example, your colleague from some other country or some other lab recommends you this very good student who is interested in a position in your lab, and you really want to hire the person. So then you need to satisfy the due process, and you need to advertise that position, right? I'm not so sure if I actually should go into the details then, but in fact, this is how it works, right? The position is advertised, but sometimes it may happen that the person for whom the position is, the position is already filled at the time of advertising. So if you're replying or if you're applying on these announced positions, don't be discouraged, right? Sometimes it's actually not true opening. And if I can have a recommendation, just get in touch directly with the person who is the head of the lab, the PI. What I was doing, I just stayed till late hours because my primary target was the United States. I stayed at my institute and started calling people directly, and that worked actually much better, right? Yeah, many people answered the phone, and they were telling me pretty openly, well, yeah, it's great that you're interested in working for our lab, but this is, come over and give us a talk. I said, okay, it's not that affordable for me to fly to the United States and just give a talk and come back, right? Today, it may be different for many of you, but at that time, I just simply couldn't afford it. So what were my other options? How to meet in person successful scientists. So luckily, Prague and Central Europe is a really nice place, and there are many conferences here. So I just picked one of those conferences which was focused at the topic close to what I wanted to do, and approached directly one of those speakers who gave a good talk, yeah, he told me, sure, yeah, we can talk about the position in my lab. You're local, find a pub, let's go to a pub, and let's discuss it over the dinner and over the beer. I probably picked a good pub because I was offered a position, or maybe it was a beer, I don't know.
Which one?
It was somewhere in Prague downtown.
Somewhere
I'm
in
not.
Prague.
Look, it was just the first one which didn't look so touristy, right?
Was it Pilsner or Budvar?
I believe it was the Budweiser, right? Look, if you compare it to the U.S. Budweiser, it's.
There might be a question, why do you want to move to the US if your Budweiser is much better than ours?
Yeah.
No, sorry.
No. This is actually a very good question, and I can definitely for students it may be important. There are actually excellent beers in the United States. Don't be discouraged by Bud Light and some other soft drinks like that with a little bit of alcohol. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend those, but there are many craft breweries, and there is actually, you can get an excellent beer in the United States.
Okay.
Going back to science, more boring topic. So yeah, I got an offer from Peter Sandberg from University of Cincinnati, and I ended up in his lab for 2 years doing my first postdoc there. And suddenly, once I was in the United States, everything was much easier, right? When you are already there, you have your foot in the door, and then it's much easier to get a position in a good lab.
So the first step is get there, and then
get there,
relocate wherever you want. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't think that, okay, I got this position in this lab, so I have to stay here. No, you don't have to. I had a friend, she was, I think, also from Syracuse University. She got a position somewhere in California, and she was really not happy. After a couple of months, she called me, look, this lab is really not good. People hate each other here, and the science is not that good as I expected from the paper. So I told her, so leave, right? And she was like, can I leave? I told them I'm gonna stay here for a couple of years. It wouldn't be fair. I mean, come on, it's your life. You're investing your time. You want to get the best out of your time in the United States. So don't think twice about that. If you're at a point when you're considering it, like leaving the lab and looking for something else, just do it, because our lives are too short to spend them doing something what we don't want to do, or in this case, working in not so good labs, because not every single lab in the US is good. It's the broad spectrum, right? Plus things like good working environment. I think it's very important to find a lab where you not only do good science, but where you also feel good, right? So, and
this is an important point, and many questions goes to that. So,
right.
So you can get stuck in a bad lab, much worse
right.
in the US than here in Brno. Yeah?
Oh, definitely, right? Definitely. So I have to say my first lab in the United States was not the best one, but it was the door which was open for me, and I just could use it to walk into the system. Yeah, if you see some concerning signals, like for me it was that Peter Sandberg was a very nice person, good scientist, but when he told me, oh, do you really have to use 12 mils of media on every single plate? Can you go with 8 to save some money? I said, oh my God, I need to leave. So, because if you want to do science, you really need to invest some money, and this is ridiculous, right? So, yeah, if you see something concerning, don't think twice and just find some better place for you. It's quite usual that people are coming and leaving. No one's gonna look at you in some kind of weird way, especially if you have a good justification for leaving. Every boss gonna love to hear that, oh, I'm more ambitious than this position can offer me. I just want to do more. I want to work hard to achieve more than I can achieve in this lab. Everyone wants to hear that, right? So if you have a good justification.
The new job, the new boss.
Yeah, the new boss wants to hear that, definitely. Yeah. Don't be discouraged that young scientist who was unhappy in her first lab in California. She was actually very happy in her second lab, and she's there ever since. So don't be discouraged. Just make the first step, and then you will see, right? You're not signing any contract in the US, right? Usually, that's different like from here, right? When you may sign some kind of work agreement, you don't do that, right? So you get an offer letter and you either accept it or not, but you can leave on your will. Usually it's like 2 weeks notice, right? So you tell your boss, you know, in 2 weeks I'm out of here, thank you. And that's it, right? On the other hand, the boss can do the same thing to you. All right, so maybe I should stop. Okay, so let me finish my career path, right? That's so important. After finishing my first postdoc in Cincinnati, I looked for some other postdoc because it was not that great place. I thought I still can learn a little bit more. And I definitely didn't want to have another PI who was in his like mid-late 60s telling me openly, oh, I don't need any new papers. You want some papers. I really don't care. I'm about to retire in a couple of years, so just don't spend too much money. And you know, I'm really not interested anymore. So I knew that my next boss needs to be young and dependent with his career on my work, so I get more support, so we have some kind of mutual interest, right? Because I think that's very important for any kind of collaboration. Find a mutual interest, and that's much easier than to kind of define a path towards that common goal. So I got a couple of offers for different postdoc positions, and picked the youngest guy who is like 6, 7 years older than me, who just got a big funding from Howard Hughes Medical Institute, was a fresh PI at the University of Colorado, Joaquin Espinoza. I took his offer and worked for him for about 15 years, almost.
It's a long time.
It is. It's unusually a long time. It was
for
not
the Czech norms, yeah.
Well, the original plan was like one paper, right? 2-3 years max, then go back. So one of those questions was, how difficult was the decision to leave the United States and come back? Actually, that was no question for me. That was not a decision. I always wanted to go back. I just stayed much longer than I expected at the beginning, right? I thought, okay, 3 to 5 years, that would be the time I want to spend abroad, and then we'll see, right?
So what was the position at the end of your, let's say, stay at the US?
So in Joaquin's lab, I started as a postdoc, then I was promoted to instructor. That's the lowest faculty position. And then I was promoted again to research assistant professor. But that's...
And what was your job? Yeah, could you describe what was your job in the group of
in the group? So as you're climbing the ranks, then you are adding on top of your like regular duties more and more. That usually means to be mentor for younger colleagues, students like undergrads and graduate students and postdocs, but also writing grants. Regrettably, not always in your own name. So because as you are progressing, your boss is also progressing and taking more and more other duties. So Joaquin, I wouldn't say by a coincidence, because he's an excellent scientist and very good organizer, became a director of Linda Cernick Institute for Down Syndrome, which is the biggest institute for Down syndrome research worldwide. And that comes also with many, not only scientific duties, but also a lot of administrative and management time. And yeah, so then he needed someone to do his science for him, and that was very often me and also some of my senior colleagues in the lab.
So you basically run his research group?
Well, that part which concerned cancer, right? Because his, once he got this position, and it was a tremendous shift in his career. Not very often you see that a scientist in mid of his or her career would change the topic of the research so much, because Joaquin's lab was established and always studied transcription factors in relation to cancer, and that's what I do. But because of some funding he got and the major discovery he did, he actually got promoted first to a position at this Institute for Down Syndrome Research, and then he became a director of that institute and pretty much driving all the efforts, or many of the efforts associated with Down syndrome research, including lobbying in Congress and having speeches in Congress about the importance of research for Down syndrome, which used to be understudied and underfunded because of a bunch of reasons. I would say mostly because it was so difficult to study anything like that before the next-gen sequencing era, because you have on the 21st chromosome over 200 genes. How do you find out which one is associated with a phenotype without sequencing the whole genome, right, or RNA, whatever? So before that, no one wanted to touch Down syndrome. I mean, no one from the research field, with a few exceptions. No one wanted to touch that even with like a telegraph pole, because it was so complicated, right? To untangle that, it was very difficult. Anyway, Joaquin succeeded, and I would say that he didn't expect that, right? It was just some small funding he just wanted to use from a local agency to do what we were doing with our projects, just sequence something and publish that and be good with it. But he had done a big discovery in this experiment, and that established his career in Down syndrome research. Anyway, so that meant that many of those duties associated with running the cancer research, the original lab, because those labs, like the cancer research and Down syndrome, were kind of separated. So that was my duty and duty of some of my colleagues, and that's why I actually decided to look for my own truly independent position, because it was always like Joaquin's lab in cancer research and Joaquin's lab in a Down syndrome, right? So I didn't have like the formal independence was one thing, and another even more important, that there are similar limitations for funding in the US when you apply for grants. Joaquin is very successful, but he needs to dedicate his effort and write grants only for Down syndrome, because you cannot have unlimited number of grants, right? So there are some limits, and he needs to dedicate everything to the Down syndrome. So that's why we agreed that I will pretty much leave, and that would be kind of the end of his cancer research lab, and he will focus on the Down syndrome from now on.
So it died with your leave, yeah?
Pretty much, yeah. Well, kind of died. It's transformed into the Down syndrome research, right? So the space was occupied by the Down syndrome people, because that branch, of course, is ever expanding. All right, so shall we I talk too much, I know.
No, that's great. I will try to manage our discussion. Well, so you achieved a very interesting position there. So you got the experience with managing the research lab. This is something more than a postdoc position, so you can compare the conditions and environment there and here. So I think here's a lot of questions concerning that. So basically, you moved here to gain independence and to promote your research career, your independent research. Yeah, that was the goal. That was the motivation of coming back home. Yeah.
And it was always the plan. This is something what I wanted to do. There are like two questions at least. If well, not phrased like that, but what were the mistakes I have done in my career, or if there are some things which I would change on the retrospect? Definitely, definitely. And one of those things which I underestimated was building up my CV, working on my own career. Right? I was. And Joaquin told me at some goodbye party they threw for me, oh, you were like the kid in the candy shop, right? You just wanted to do everything, use all the equipment at once, and do all the experiments you can do. And yeah, that was exactly me. I just wanted to focus on science, to do good science, publish good papers. And I was lucky to be in a well-funded lab. And after initial fights, Joaquin gave me pretty much total independence in choosing my own project. He just first gave me money, and then let me to write projects to get the money for the lab. So it was excellent position, right? So I could do whatever I wanted, pretty much within some kind of margins. And that was also an issue for my career, because I didn't focus on writing fellowships, right? There were some limitations, and that was my own justification why I am not doing that, because not only the lab has enough money, and I wouldn't be helping that much, because it takes time. And I rather committed that time to my experiments. But on your CV, it's very important to have some fellowships. And I never had a good mentor who would tell me exactly that. I said, well, okay, well, we have money to do the research. I don't need to bring anything in. I will bring it through Joaquin's name, and that will be just fine. But I was not thinking well about my future career, right? When you need to show that you not only have some kind of small grants in your name, but also like from the early on in your career, you apply for all kinds of fellowships for you.
So what do you need to bear in mind for your future career? So one is publications.
Yeah. publications, but also fellowships, or at least like little grants, which I kind of have some, but there were limits, at least at that time when I was a postdoc, that you had to be either permanent resident or citizen of the US to apply for many of those fellowships.
So you had difficulties to do that.
Right. So there were some legal barriers, and I thought, oh, okay, I cannot do it anyway. But if I looked harder and if I made some compromises, I could probably apply for some fellowships from private foundations. On a retrospect, yeah, I probably should have done that, and I should like keep building my CV better than I have done, right?
And we are speaking about one question, and it's about, is postdoc truly independent or still under the supervisor's idea? So what kind of room do you have to build your own career during your postdoc position?
I don't think that there is like one size which would fit all the postdocs, right? So every postdoc is different. Every person has different strengths and weaknesses, right? Someone is better in like using his or her hands and doing a really good job pipetting and really enjoys that, like me. Working at a bench, right, fine. Or someone really likes to do some kind of bioinformatics or writing, or something else, right? So different roles for postdoc from this point of view, but also from the point of view independence versus being more managed, or postdocs shouldn't be probably micromanaged, should probably be kind of independent. So, like, the general rule for me, at least, would be that if you give your postdoc question, like, or hypothesis, a postdoc should be able to propose a way how to solve the problem, propose methods, how to tackle the scientific question. It doesn't have to be correct, right? Just coming up with ideas. I think that's the role for postdoc. If a grad student can do that, perfect, right? And of course, there's much greater tolerance for silly proposals and not very well baked ideas. So yeah, just being active more and more, starting from like the undergrad towards the postdoc, and taking more and more duties as far as not only, okay, so let's do this and that method to get some data which can answer this question, but also coming up with ideas how to develop further the project, right? So it's not only to get ideas or propose ways how to solve a question, but also how to develop the project some further. One of the questions I remember I got from Joaquin when I applied for a position in his lab was, like, look, you know our last paper, right? So we have done this and that. What would be the next experiment? What would be the next project you would propose, right? And if you can answer, and it doesn't have to be like greatest answer, right? But if you have ideas and if you can formulate the ideas and propose something interesting, you're in a very good spot to be hired as a postdoc, right?
That's great. That's great. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't hold yourself back. PIs usually like ambitious people, so I'm not saying you should propose, let's repeat this experiment on the International Space Station. That may be kind of out of reach for many of the PIs. So, but if you propose something less silly than that, you may attract attention of many of those PIs looking for new hire.
From the perspective of PI, you already touched on that. When you work somewhere and you don't like something, just move on. But how to find? The question is how to know if the PI is a good mentor or if you are in a good hands. Let's say that.
That's actually an excellent question, and I think it's important and quite often underestimated when, at least I talk to people, how they chose their positions. What I would recommend, just talk to people who are current or former employees of the lab. They usually have no reason why to lie to you. At some points, I told applicants, just don't join our lab right now. Because, for example, we don't have funding for a long period, right? We are in some kind of transition period. Our grants will be expiring in, I don't know, a year from now, and we still don't have funding for like a long time, right? Right now. Either wait or find something else, right? So, good PI. Talk to people who went through that lab, who spent some time with the PI, and also look at what they achieved, if they really achieved their goals. When I was interviewing applicants for postdoc positions in our lab, I asked them usually, okay, so you will be doing postdoc in our lab for a couple of years, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years. What do you want to do after that? Where do you want to be in 5 years from now, right? Can we help you to achieve that, to get where you want to be in a couple of years from now? Because if we don't, why do you want to waste your time in our lab? So, going back to the PI, look where his or her people ended up to be after doing the postdoc, for example, in the lab. If you want...
How can you know that?
Well, usually the lab has some kind of website with alumni, or you can look at the papers, right, and look up the names where those people ended up, or just talk to the postdocs and students from the lab. They are usually very open, and they cannot tell you, oh, look, he and her, they wanted to find a position in academia, but no one succeeded ever from our lab because, yeah, we didn't have either luck or good or a lot of help to achieve that goal, because that's actually what many postdocs want, right? To work hard and then apply for their independent position, get their own lab, have their own research group. Yeah, the pyramid of the position is pretty dull. There are very few PI positions and many postdocs going through the system. So not everyone can obviously achieve that, but there are definitely big differences between labs. And some of them are producing constantly new PIs, and some of them are not very good in it. And I think this usually comes down to the PI, how the PI works with his people. The head of my former department, pharmacology at the University of Colorado, Heidi Ford, she's great with working with her people, helping them developing their careers. And she is a role model for me how to work with people, because it's so obvious that she has on her mind future success of her people, right? Not only squeeze the maximum performance out of her workers, yeah, she's tough, right? She has a weekly meetings and she demands results from everyone, right? But also she is helping to promote the people and to get them to their next positions, right? And
how does she do that?
Well, networking and actively seeking those positions, recommending, and also looking at those things in the CV which are important for the, let's say, the hiring committees at university who decide who to hire as a new PI. Right. So looking at that from those perspectives, pretty much everyone in her lab has a fellowship, right? So, and she's not only asking people to do that, but helping also to write those fellowships and teaching people how to write grants, how to write fellowships. Because that's also something you need to learn. It doesn't come easy.
Great, so this is what you should expect from your mentor, from your PI. These are important points. Could we move to the questions about the infrastructure? So we touch on that. You can find a great lab concerning the infrastructure here in Brno, and in the US you can find labs with a crap infrastructure. But can you compare that? Is there a general rule? And there's a related question. Is it true that labs in the US are much dirtier than in here? Yes, so could you touch on that?
That's a very nice one. Okay, first, infrastructure and equipment. My lab at the Institute of Biophysics was much better equipped than the lab in Cincinnati and even Joaquin's lab, who had free money from HHMI to buy an expensive instrument every single year, right? A giveaway. We had much better equipment here in Brno in our lab. Why it was so? I don't know. People have just many instruments around, and that's good. It's about how money is spent in science. Maybe it's different now. I still cannot say that much because I'm back for less than 2 months. But at that time, I had a feeling that we are spending so much money on instruments and so little on chemicals and running the experiments. So there was a big disproportion, right? So we had all the tools, all the toys here, but it was much more difficult to find money. And I don't take it as a criticism of the PIs here, because even now, when I see the budgets for, let's say, standard GET grants, it's, I have to say, I admire people how they work with that, and that they actually publish really good papers with the little money they have, right? So infrastructure, like no concerns, no complaints whatsoever. Quite the opposite. I would say that we have a lot of very nice instruments around, right? A lot. The question is where to find the money for the chemicals, for the consumables,
to run the projects.
To just run the experiments, because vast majority of the experiments we are running do not produce any positive data, and that's the nature of the science, right? That's the reality, right? We cannot expect that every single thing is going to produce a paper. No, it doesn't work like that. And in searching and in just running small projects, most of which will end up nowhere in dead ends and never produce anything. That's just how the science is done, in my opinion. So if there's dirty labs.
Yeah, dirty labs. Yeah, that's
okay. I'm not sure if it was only Colorado, because Colorado has like half of the precipitation of Czech Republic. Very dry air. That means fewer fungi and bacteria and yeast in the air, right? So that helps. On the other hand, every single person in the lab just wears plain clothing, white coat only for picture taking, or if there's some kind of famous visitor. Yeah, I remember in Boulder, we had Jared Polis, who was the senator for Colorado, visiting the university, so they cleaned all the floors. But that happened like once every year. Well, they were just sweeping it, but not like deep cleaning. And yeah, it was filthy. It was filthy. You definitely can see the dirt. Colorado is like civilized country, like any country you know. We like don't ride horses there, and we don't park them in our labs. But it's close as far as what you would expect on the floor when you dose these things. Yeah, but for some reason, we never had any issues with contaminations, or like very few, right? Including working with cultures like iPSCs without any antimicrobial agents in the media, including a colleague of mine just opening the dishes under the scope and picking colonies and keep like cultivating that. Yeah, she's like sprayed everything around the scope to prevent any contamination, but somehow it worked, right? I'm not saying you should stop wearing lab coats or changing your clothes, but just be relaxed. Be more aware of your own safety, right? So what is definitely looked at, if you have closed-toe shoes, long pants, like safety, and that's the concern, not the color of your coat. That doesn't matter, right? Just keep in mind that you will be working with acids and some nasty stuff, and splashes may occur, so rather damage your clothing than your skin.
Yeah. So we are approaching the topic about the differences, and
right.
What do you value most as a researcher and from the point of research support in the US, and can you compare it to the environment here?
Again, I spent a lot of time over there, so I cannot compare it directly with how it looks here right now. Right? If I can compare it to the time when I was leaving, I think the biggest difference would be the mindset, right? I always hated the cheesy American phrases like the sky is the limit and just go big or go home and things like that, right? But on the other hand, it kind of makes sense, right? What are we waiting for, right? And again, lives are short. Why not to do the best what we can, right? Why to limit ourselves like I was limiting myself when I was grad student here or before the postdoc, right? There were experiments or approaches I really didn't consider because I knew we will never have money for anything like that, and let's not think about it at all, right? So just be open and rather find ways how to achieve something than just give up when you don't have to give up, right? Because sometimes there are ways you may not know about, and just, yeah, think big. And yeah,
So the mindset is something
the
that
mindset,
really drives you to do and to achieve.
Yeah, I know it sounds cheesy. Yeah, but that's my experience, right?
Yeah. So perhaps, you are, as I said, quite a short arrival here, but perhaps you can comment on what was the most difficult after you returned? I mean, in the research and etc. Not.
I'm trying to look at the silver lining of every cloud. Yeah, that's another American thing. So I really don't know yet about. I was, well, first, I'm here for a short time.
So no cultural shock?
No. Look, and there's another question about what are the differences life-wise living here and in the US. No differences whatsoever, right? They're just little cultural things, right? But, you know, in the Western world, everything works, right? You feel reasonably safe. And, you know, these are negligible things. You can, if you can operate here, you can operate anywhere else in the Western world, I believe, right? Including in the US, right? So don't expect anything major. Okay, if you hate cars, you may have difficulties because you need to drive in the United States, right? That would be the only thing, right? Because everything is so damn far away. You need to have a car, right? But if you make peace with that, you will be good. So don't worry about that at all. There are very few differences which are like really concerning, right? I would say you may start appreciate things once you leave, like healthcare, when you may realize that it's actually not for free, and there are places, even in the civilized world, that where healthcare is an issue for many people, and on the other hand, I have to say that at pretty much every university, you will be fine. Once you're an employee of a university, you will have healthcare, right? So you don't have to go through some kind of programs like Obamacare. But when you look around, you will see that not many people, or not all the people, are as lucky as you are, right? So that would be like one thing where are maybe some differences, which wouldn't like concern you directly, but you may perceive that as an issue, right?
A lot of words comes about the work-life balance. I know it from the clinical medicine point of view. When you are doing residency, you just forget life and you just spend time in the hospital, and after that you can afford a reasonably high, let's say, standard of living. So how is it about in the research?
Very good question, thank you. I think it's again, it depends. It depends on the PI, and mostly it depends on the individual. You know, no one's going to chain you in the lab. If you will be spending there 12, 15 hours, it's up to you, right? Like there are, again, no limits. No one's going to tell you, oh, go home because you cannot run your experiments through the night because you won't, right? No one's gonna clock your hours, so it's different, and I definitely can see a shift, especially after COVID, from many people working long hours, especially if your job is your hobby at the same time, like it's my case. So I just don't play golf in the afternoon. I just stay in the lab and do whatever I want to do. So if your job is your hobby, and if it really gives you the endorphins, you probably don't care that much. On the other hand, definitely I can see that the culture is shifting, and it's up to the PIs to adopt. right? We need to respect the people that they want and need to have the life outside of the lab. And I think that's the norm, right? So the norm is regular lives, right? But if you want to work more, you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome and appreciate it. So yeah, don't worry about that. It's gonna be like very similar like here. Yeah, if you walk around the university at 10 p.m. on Saturday, you may see some labs where there are people working. Yeah, that's true, right? But probably fewer than 20 years ago, right? So the culture is shifting, but there are still people who do that because they love it, right? So there are no limits. Look, at the Institute of Biophysics, there was a that, and at every single evening at 11 p.m. you had to leave because the alarm was turned on, and then the night guard was like walking the rounds, and yeah, they wanted you out of the building, right? So there will be no limits like that, right? So if you have an experiment time, so you have to collect your samples, I don't know, every 4 hours, and you need to be for like full 24 hours in the lab, yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah, don't even think about that. I never heard about an institute which wouldn't be open for like 24/7, right? So don't worry if you want to work hard. There are no limits there. On the other hand, this is not the norm, right? Don't expect that this will be demanded. If anyone demands something like that from you, that's a red flag, and leave the place if you're not comfortable with that, right? So, or just complain, right? Complain, because every PI has a superior, right?
Yeah, thank you. There are some questions. I'm not sure if you are able to answer that. So something about postdoc scenario in the US compared to Europe. Are you aware of the differences?
I don't have an European experience, so I can talk about it. And again, my experience is limited, right? I have done only 2 postdocs, so I can talk about those. But I don't have enough data to make a significant observations about postdocs in general, right? I would say big differences. Give it a try. If you don't like it, move on until you find a place where you fit in well.
Question about industrial postdoc. Do you know anything about it in the US and the
Well, that's a good question, because most of the postdocs actually end up in industry anyway, right? Industry, like biotech, is much bigger in the United States than anywhere in Europe, but not everywhere in the United States. It's mostly Boston area and Bay Area. I talk, because I considered all kinds of career paths. I talked to one of the big investors into biotech. What would be his recommendation, like someone who can see the system from like the totally opposite side of the fence. So he told me, look, you have a great skill set, but you need to move either to San Francisco or that area or to Boston, because 85% of the biotech is over there at those 2 places. So career in biotech is great. You're gonna get more money than in academia, but your job security is even worse than in academia, right? Not only like in academia, you're on soft money, and if you don't renew your grant, you know you're screwed. But in industry, it can happen that someone in Roche headquarters in Switzerland looks at the spreadsheets and decides, oh, this branch, this research branch is not making us enough money. Let's get rid of that. And like that, 1,000 scientists are without a job, right? So yeah, you get more money, but you never know for how long, right? So if your significant other has a good job, maybe you can afford that, but I always wanted to stay in academia, right? I kind of tested the waters, how would it be in bioindustry, and you can switch to bioindustry even at later points of your career, later stages of your career. But the typical time when you go for like bioindustry, it's, I wouldn't say so much a postdoc, but after the postdoc, right? Yeah, I have some friends who done a postdoc in the biotech, but not that many. Not that many. I think it's more common that you do the postdoc and then go to biotech. Although I have to say, I probably know more postdocs than the grad students, so don't take that statement with a grain of salt. Okay, so...
Well, I think there's the last question we will cover, and this is the personal tip. How do you keep yourself organized and how you start writing an article? So, yeah, these are the tips for the beginners, I would say.
Good.
Not, I'm sorry, not only for the beginners, even I would benefit from your answer.
So, I think first, ask the PI, what's the system in the lab? Adopt the system, because think about that, you will leave the lab in a couple of years and they're gonna need to use your data for some time, right? And to keep it as a proof for, you know, the published data, because someone may question that, right? That can happen. So adopt the system of the lab. If you don't like the system, talk to other people around what is their system, right? I can give you some specific tips on that, but first and foremost, I would say adopt the system of the lab, because that's like the entity where everyone should use at least the basics and share the basics of organizing experiments and samples and data in general. If that was the question, if that was more like a general question, I can answer it later in person.
So is it about from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. I write? From 10 a.m. to 12 a.m.
Well, when I joined the lab, Joaquin told us just be here before the noon, and because there were many students there, and don't leave before 3 p.m. Right? I need at least to have some time to overlap with you, and so we can talk, right? But everything else is pretty relaxed. No one cares when you show up. What matters is what data you produce, right? If you prefer to work nights, like me, you are more than welcome to. If you prefer to come early in the morning, it's perfect. You're gonna have everything for yourself, right? You don't have to ask anyone, oh, are you gonna run those gels today? Can I use all the equipment? Like I was bothering all my colleagues every single morning, and that was kind of issue at the beginning before we found a common language. So it's don't worry about like hours. That's pretty much like non-existent as far as I know. What's important is the performance, is the data, right? And again, COVID caused that many of us work quite a lot from home, right? Joaquin, for example, I don't think he was on campus for like a year, right? He bought a massive property in mountains. He lives on like the top of the mountain, has a good internet connection there, and has like one Zoom meeting after another, right? During COVID, we had 2 meetings every single day, right? One in the morning, one in the afternoon. It was crazy, right? But the Zoom meetings, that was a practice even before, and it's much more practice even now, right? Bioinformaticians, like they don't leave their either offices or houses almost whatsoever, right? There are a couple I haven't met in person, and they were members of the lab for years and years. Some of them actually worked from a different state,
yeah.
right? But it worked, right? I knew their faces because every time when we needed to discuss something, we had a Zoom meeting, and it was fine, right? So yeah, this is part of the new norm. People spend less time at the workplace and have many more meetings online and work from home much more, right? That also comes hand in hand with the time you see people in the lab, much less than in the past, right? And that's a fact, right? Mm-hmm. I have to say that many PIs, at one of our last faculty meetings we had there, complained about the performance. That the performance before the COVID, as far as experiments done, mm-hmm. data produced, dropped, mm-hmm. and it's recovering slowly. I understand it was not an easy time, and for many people it was very difficult. But again, it's a fact. On the other hand, the good news is, everyone, almost everyone as far as I know, respected different needs of different people, and PIs and the system adopted to it, right? We found common ways how to like keep working together, and yeah, it worked. Maybe we are still not at the production level what was before the COVID, but we'll get there. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there was like one thing which I wanted to say, because many people ask me, so what are the things I should look for when I'm looking for a postdoc, right? And because this was not a question, I got only here, but also from those postdocs we interviewed, because usually you interview in a bunch of places, right? And then you choose based on the offer, based on the science, based on all kinds of criteria. And I would say that there are 4 important criteria I would use when looking for a postdoc, right? Or actually a grad school if you want to get your PhD from some other university. First and foremost, funding. Yeah, it's sad, but without money, you cannot do your science. And funding for a long period of time. Regrettably, when Joaquin started his lab, yeah, he got some kind of startup package, but getting grant is difficult, even for really good scientists like he is. He had a row of 16 unsuccessful grant applications and ran out of the money. Had to let 2 of his postdocs go because he simply had no money for their salaries. And those guys, I would even say, wasted 2 years of their lives because they didn't manage to finish those projects in 2 years and ended up with like no publications, no experience which would boil down to a paper or something palpable in Joaquin's lab. And I would recommend every single person to look and ask the PI who is giving you the offer, do you have enough money for me? Do you have funding for next 3, maybe 4 years? And just don't take can answer, oh, we will get some grants, don't worry about that, we will always get some money. No, you know, it's your life, right? You are risking quite a lot, right? So there are very few postdocs. There are many more openings than actually postdocs applying for those openings. So you can choose. And you're coming from the environment where you have really good skills. Don't underestimate yourself, right? You don't have to be grateful for every single person's offer, yeah, you can work in my lab if you beg. No, you are in totally different position. Trust me, there are many openings and people are looking badly for people. So you definitely can choose, right? So money, that's the most important thing. Second, quality of science, right? How good papers in how good journals and how well is the science done, right? And you can, if you're a grad student, you can see it, right? There is, it's not difficult to say if the science is done well or not. And again, you can also talk to people who are current members of the lab. The third question is, do you like how the science is done in your lab? Do you have any concerns? You can ask a question like that. I would do that. So that's the second thing. Third thing, is the PI good mentor or not? Is he or she helping actively his people to make the next step, to achieve the next position of which his or her people want to get, right? And fourth would be what is actually the topic, what they are doing, right? When I looked for a position, I had it slightly backwards. For me, it was very important. What is the lab doing? Like, what is the focus? And I don't think, on the retrospect, that this should be the top criteria. Yes, it's important. We need to work on something to what we can make connection, right? What's our calling, right? There are many things in the science where great things are done, but it's just simply not my calling. I probably wouldn't be able to invest, you know, the weekends and nights to something what is just not that close to my heart, right? So yeah, it is important, but there are even more important things than this.
Great, great. These are great suggestions. Thank you for sharing that. We covered almost every question that was submitted, so I think it would be important to offer the opportunity for you who came here to ask from the audience 1-2 questions, because we ran from our...
Do you have any open position now?
Oh, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to promote my own lab of one. So I would say yes. Actually, as we speak, I have some open documents on my computer where I'm putting together master degree thesis layouts, right? So I will have, because first, of course, to be true to what I just said, I need to get the funding, right? I want to be respectful to people's time and investment, because they're gonna invest their effort and time into working with me, right? So I'm really kind of conservative because of the experience Joaquin made as a young PI. I just don't want to be in a position telling someone, okay, sorry, we ran out of the money, this is it. So master degree thesis, yes. PhD thesis, I'm not so comfortable at this point, but if you're interested, let's keep talking, right? maybe we can find some common ways, not for postdocs. I really cannot afford at this point a postdoc, I'm sorry. But master degree thesis, definitely. PhD thesis, maybe. Not postdocs at this point.
So you achieved some startup
yes,
funding from the med school, so
definitely I'm very
just
grateful
to establish your group and start from
right.
scratch. Yeah.
Right. If there would be a philosophy as far as how to spend the money for research, I would like my team to enjoy something what I couldn't enjoy as a student. That would be to have a little bit more money than average, I would say, to do good and maybe also expensive experiments, right? Because I think it's important to use really good methods, or maybe best methods you can use to answer a scientific question, right? Just to be somewhere and sit and read papers, I know it's nice and enjoyable, but I would like my people to have enough money for pipetting, for running the experiments, right? I just don't want to tell anyone, use 8 mils of media.
I understand.
Yeah, so this is just on the point of explaining why I'm a little bit hesitating to say, oh, okay, yeah, everyone, come to my lab, please, right now.
Yeah, we will.
Plus, the lab is still not finished. It's in the building which is under construction right now.
So, patience. Any other question? Yeah, please, go ahead.
I wanted to ask if you have any experience with people who went into industry as entrepreneurs or startups or spin-off based on their research.
Yes and no. I think there are few opportunities. There are some, but in general, the research in academia, not so often provides you with an opportunity to make a startup, right? Not very often. Much more often you can patent something, but to start a startup, you need a lot of capital, right? Almost every single time, unless you have some kind of super bright idea, you can start with very little money. I know some, but this is rare. It happens, it's rare, but I think what would be crucial just to find investors. And I'm not sure, again, I was not here for a long time, but I'm not sure if Czech Republic is the best place to do it, because we don't have the long history of this kind of funding, this kind of investors, high risk, high gain, right? I think if you have such an idea to go for a startup, great, but I would probably recommend you to go elsewhere searching for money, right?
I would be more optimistic nowadays. The environment is changing, and here are the funds for the, establishing startups. So, but it's in its infancy. So there are better places to start at, but here it's getting better every day.
Great.
Okay. So that's it.
Yeah, if you have any questions, well, thank you again for coming, but if you have any questions for me later, feel free to approach me anytime. It's my weird last name. It's not that difficult to Google me up. So yeah, thank you again for your questions. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate this opportunity. So, and thank you again for the organizers and you for
thank you.
Nice
it was very generous of you to share your, let's say, great experiences. Yeah, I think that you made a contribution that's very valuable.
Well, I will do my best.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.